Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome. My name is Yusra Rasool and you're watching RadioLUMS. This is our second episode in collaboration with CodeNinja, and today we're diving deep into the world of STEM, fueling innovation and IT growth within Pakistan. Today we have Ahsan Jamil, managing partner and founder of SAI Venture Capital. SAI is a technology investment fund that is committed to investing in and growing local companies in Pakistan. For CodeNinja, he plays a pivotal role as a strategic partner in helping expand its global footprint, making it one of the fastest growing AI and digital transformation firms to come out of APSIA. So, hello Ahsan, how are you doing?
Thank you for having me.
Happy to have you here. Before we start off and get into the technical conversation, how has your journey so far been like, and how has your role in CodeNinja been? And what has your role in CodeNinja been like?
Yeah, prior to starting my investment company and investing in growth capital in Pakistan, I was in the States for a couple of decades. My background is primarily a technologist, then going into holding company structures where we made acquisitions and did restructuring of companies. Been in this journey of investing for the last about 3 years or so. I look at both startups and software type companies which are building products and solutions for global enterprises. And CodeNinja is one of our portfolio companies, which we're very proud of. And their journey has been great. Our model of investing is very operational. So the idea is that for us to be global players, for companies out of emerging markets like Pakistan to compete globally in the space and the asset class we're targeting, it takes a lot more than capital. We want exposure, capital, we want restructuring. There's a whole gamut of things that make that success happen. And so far we've been on that journey with CodeNinja for about a year and a half or so. And it's been a wonderful experience seeing Mukhtar, Umar, Adil, and the rest of the leadership and the rest of the organization have such a positive, taking such positive strides of evolving themselves, and then that resulting in client gains, reputational growth. It's been a very nice journey so far.
Yeah, I think let's start from the basic here, and let's focus on Pakistan and how जो STEM graduates हैं, what position they play in this, because I think उनका बहुत एक बड़ा role है in all of this. And Pakistan is currently producing 500,000 STEM graduates annually, which is a very, very large number. लेकिन जो एक successful STEM education होती है, what does that look like, and what are the key factors to determine that, especially for a country like Pakistan, which is trying to make a breakthrough in the IT sector? So what does that look like? And also another follow-up question that I would like to ask you is how can we make STEM education more industry aligned, ताकि जो fresh graduates हैं that are coming out of this area, how are they more well prepared for this?
So I'll answer the second question first, because we're actively working on that with different institutions within Pakistan on how to align industrial need with the talent that's coming out. Because in our basic analysis of how curriculums are developed and executed, there's a massive gap. And even when that gap is addressed, it's addressed in a very non-foundational manner. And what I mean by that is that we have, students coming out of universities, good schools, who are being taught to do certain things, but not enough time is being spent on design thinking with them. And that we are seeing as a massive problem. And if you tie it to your first question, we have 500,000 people or so coming out of STEM programs. Why is it that is not having a direct impact on our GDP, right? So STEM is a very foundationally necessary thing across the world because it touches technology, engineering, mathematics. These are foundations for all types of industries and growth. So I think that the devil's in the details, which is, what are you teaching in STEM? And it constantly changes. So STEM programs back in 2010 were very different to what they're in 2025. The concept and the macro subjects are the same because they're foundational, but what's in it changes. And I feel like in Pakistan, specifically on the basic studies we've done, is that is we're still behind, right? We're not teaching the things within STEM that need to be taught for these students to come out and add value fairly immediately. And one of the key things in that is design thinking. If you apply that to our portfolio of companies, we spend most amount of time redesigning solution architecture thinking, because that's where design comes in. And it is so important now, with the age of AI coming into foray, that that thing is given extra emphasis. How do you design things? How do you think about things? Because you're not going to need engineering knowledge for the basic mundane tasks going forward. In the next 2 to 3 years, those things are all going to be fairly automated. There'll be products for consumers to use, products for companies to use, where the basic stuff will not require humans, which means that people who are focusing on basic skills that they can multiply and earn an income from or build a business around, they'll be much less.
Yeah. I think Pakistan mein one thing that I've noticed is that we have a very herd mindset. So it's more like jo trend mein aayega na, everyone's going to start following that. So we saw that a few years ago with like the entire, I mean, doctors are chalo like a universal and thing that's going to happen all the time. But you'll see this trend where everyone's becoming a doctor. You see this trend where everyone's becoming a CS graduate. But they're doing it just because acha job market achhi hai, we have better job prospects. But what is one thing that you think on a personal level, ठीक है, अगर STEM education in Pakistan की हम बात करें, and universities need to focus on, designing and all of that stuff, problem solving skills. But what is one thing that individual students can do on their own to make sure that they excel when they are applying for jobs and they stand out in that sector?
So I think being less task oriented and being more foundational analysis focused. And what foundational analysis does is, so students, when they're coming out, there's a limited vantage point, right? And they're thinking about, whether I'm going to be an entrepreneur or whether I'm going to add value in an organization. They have very immediate goals in front of them. And those are important. You can't discount them. But it is a very disproportionate focus on that versus foundational thinking, analytical thinking. Those things are slower. Those are very iterative. And students need to spend a lot more time in that space so that they are marinating themselves to be ready for a world where basic task skills will not be required of them. Deeper thinking will be required of them. Leadership will be required of them. Things that are harder to come by. That maybe in my time when I was a younger associate, you spend 8-10 years, get the basic skills, you're adding value by at least executing the things and then you get the opportunity to be a strategic thought leader. That cycle is not going to be that long because basic skills are not required of humans in the next 4 or 5 years. They'll be gone. So students should really spend a lot of time on foundational thinking. Our curriculums in schools need to be relooked at in universities, and by schools I mean universities and high school. They need to be relooked at a very, very basic level. We absolutely should have a singular focus on design thinking. Whatever you're working on. You could be a technopreneur, you could be in technology in an MNC, you could be having your own brick and mortar business. Design thinking focus is an absolute necessity. And that's what actually, having 250 odd million people, the difference between being a burden versus being a value contributor is actually that. If you turn your education around, then you've got this massive block of people adding value, and value compared to global levels, and then the tide just turns. But if the same group of people is not being trained to add and increase the size of the pie, then they can be a burden on the state, and there's social things that need to be taken care of, medical, so on and so forth. So, if we don't do this now, next 5 years, there might not be an opportunity.
But how do we ensure that jo Pakistan ki future workforce hai, it's not only technically competent, but it's also it has those leadership roles and skills that we need? Because right now, I feel like the issue that we have with majority of the universities in Pakistan is they're so focused on rote learning. They're so focused on just making sure that everyone gets good GPAs, that they're not focusing on networking skills. They're not focusing on other skills, like you said, design skills that the students actually need. And then what ends up happening is कि एक अगर, for example, university है, वहाँ से 300 बच्चा graduate हो रहा है, तो वो 300 में कुछ इतना different है नहीं that they stand out, right? They're all 300 of them are graduating. So how do we ensure that, we can tackle that situation? Apart from I understand you're saying the design situation, but on a more surface level conversation for the normal person that has very basic resources and skills available to them, how do they?
Yeah, I think the KPIs that universities have for themselves for success, they need to be redone, because that's what will trickle down into curriculums and teaching methods and what matters to change. That will only change when universities change their KPIs. Today, universities measure, like if I'm getting 300 graduates, how many of them are employed, right? And at what rate are they employed at? That's pretty much it, right? Universities aren't tracking how high or what impact those people are making down the road, right? Because the KPIs are designed for the last 25 years to be that, or even longer. Universities need to change that. All the focus needs to be on how the students can do better analysis. And the better analysis constantly changes, because if you had asked me 20 years ago, how do you improve analytical skills in a student? It would start with foundational information gathering. Well, in order for you to analyze something, you need to be able to gather information, synthesize it first, before you can form an opinion and a strategy out of it. Well, guess what? It would take me a year to analyze a specific problem in the past and then come with today. You can do it in minutes. You don't need to spend that time. So technology changes and provides you more tools, which means that people now need to adjust on how that skill is developed. So if we talk about the analytical skills, you are now doing analysis based on information synthesized for you, which would take a year, even 10 years ago, would take a year to do. You can have it in minutes. You're now spending more time on how to permutate, iterate through that, test it, your hypothesis. So curriculums need to change, understanding these tools are available, and really hone in on analytical skills. Because what happens is, as you progress from students to professionals or entrepreneurs and you move up, you realize that the real value you have for anyone is the ability to increase the size of the pie, right? Strategic acumen to do that, whatever field you're in. Could be your own career, could be you running a company. That doesn't happen if you don't have the foundational analytical skills built early. So it all kind of is cyclical, and because we only measured amount of people employed and at what rate are they employed as the only KPI, the focus doesn't transition there, So,
yeah.
But HEC would be the right people to talk about this.
I think moving on to the role of startups, because startups is a very thriving, again, situation in Pakistan. And they're driving digital transformation across industries as well. Lekin, apart from job creation, Pakistan mein jo tech startups hain, how are they contributing to the development of IT infrastructure and also fostering homegrown innovation?
Massively so. And when I say startups, I categorize both different types. So usually startups are categorized as product companies, but in Pakistan, majority of the tech companies, whether they're doing products or they're doing services or B2B services, they're young. We only have a handful of companies that have scaled, if anything, and very few at a global level. You can count them on your fingers. Startups have a pivotal role to play because they are basically dealing on white canvas situations and increasing the size of the pie, right? So they come in and they say, I'm going to solve a problem. I'm going to create value, right? That mindset is absolutely necessary. Pakistan's environment is very different than the rest of the world because the way we give capital, the way we value companies, the local opportunity, discretionary incomes, there are macro factors that impact startups. But, if you ask me, they're absolutely necessary because old industries that have been here for a while, they're not innovating as fast. And without an innovative ecosystem, we're not making global impact. So startups or young tech companies or tech-focused companies are the ones who are going to bring about that change. And I think the more of them that are here, that means more students in universities focus on this space. And I'm a firm believer, regardless of industry that you're in now going forward, you're a tech company. So whether you're a retailer or you are whoever, you are a tech company. So the more technologists that will come out of this space, more startups will boom. They will have demand for people. University will focus on that. That makes the ecosystem much, much better.
Yeah. And also, obviously, एक startup culture को या industry को thrive करने के लिए, it's very important that other sectors also play a very huge role in all of this, right? Mm-hmm. So what initiatives, whether they're from investors, governments, or even corporate entities, what initiatives do you believe will help create that sort of supportive environment for these startups to thrive in Pakistan?
Yeah. So there's a supportive environment and there's a supportive ecosystem. The supportive ecosystem, it's a chicken and egg problem, right? So we need lawyers, we need incubation centers, we need, a whole bunch of support ecosystem in the private sector. That only starts to spawn and get mature when you have some demand, right? And so like people like myself and Sai, when we invest, now we need more lawyers. We're doing more contracts. We're doing mergers. We're doing partnerships. We need more, legal support. Now there are only a handful. If there are 5 of us, we would need 50 of them, right? Now, when that happens, people grow. So that's a little bit of a, journey. On the government side, they are very focused on supporting the tech ecosystem. I think that intention I've seen over the last 4 or 5 years since I've been engaged in Pakistan, that everybody, unanimously wants to support that. They want to support technology, the birth of new firms, exports. These are pretty sort of bipartisan topics here. Now, in order for that to happen, Sai, myself, and other investors, we've been actively talking to SECP, FPR, and the agencies. And we, at least the people we talk to at the top of the agency, they're very supportive of that. But that culture within those institutions to actually be supportive, be proactive in suggesting changes, that's still taking time, Yeah, we can get our way through when things need to move and it's the right thing to do. We can talk to the right people and say this needs to happen. But the overall ecosystem, that entire department, right? The evolution in that is still slow, in my opinion. We're in a race. Since 2020, 2021, when technology took a tectonic shift and AI is the new focus, the world is in a race to capture this multi-trillion pie. So it would be extremely helpful if, the government agencies are actively looking at solving things, and they are. It's just at the top, I find the solution-oriented mindset much more on the top than I find within institutions, so that our teams can work with them and move things fast. I think that's where I find most of the pain points.
Yeah, and also Pakistan, it's becoming a very attractive hub for enterprise-level digital transformation, right? So कॉस्ट एफिशिएंसी के अलावा जो की फैक्टर्स, वो क्या की फैक्टर्स हैं जो पाकिस्तान को वो एक अट्रैक्टिव हब बना रहे हैं, एंड ऑल्सो जो हाउ कैन द कंट्री फर्दर डेवलप इट्स आईटी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर टू सपोर्ट दिस ग्रोथ ऑफ इट्स.
So price point usually, even for our portfolio of companies, is the last thing we talk about, right? It only matters when you're adding value, at least at global parity. So we have a few advantages for us. So I'm sure you're familiar, we have a white canvas type situation. We don't have IT companies employing 100,000 people that have to transform the entire organization to work in the world of AI. We have younger companies, right? It is much easier to take 1,000 or 2,000 person company and transition them to being a modern technology, company versus a 100,000 person company. So we have that advantage. Where we do lack, as I said earlier, is that we need to get away from task-oriented, let's have a herd mentality, to actually saying and having an honest conversations with ourselves to say, what does global value look like? Let's ask that question. What does global value look like? So if, for example, CodeNinja is working with an organization in Saudi Arabia, they're not hiding from the fact that what is the true definition of global value? And then we look inwards and say, can we provide that value? Can we compete with other competitors who want to go after the same value prop? It's about honest conversations. And if we lack in it, we'll find out and we'll fix and we'll try again, right? In a similar situation. But in a lot of cases, at least with the organizations now, they are not failing that. They're succeeding. And when you're succeeding and you're competing with global players in the same part, and then you have pricing the way we do, then it becomes a slam down. That's when growth happens. We do growth capital, but we're a venture capital company because we do believe in growth trajectories of VCs. And that's what these asset classes and these companies are pursuing. So that's kind of how we look at in terms of impact globally.
Okay, so public-private partnerships की जब बात करते हैं, what are some examples of strategic public-private partnerships that have successfully contributed to this IT infrastructure growth within Pakistan, या फिर even internationally, because I feel like public-private partnerships play a very, very huge role in this entire growth process, right?
Yeah.
So whether that's in Pakistan, या अगर internationally भी है, तो how can Pakistan, learn from these examples?
No, internationally, तो बहुत examples हैं, right? Like the last big one I remember was, I think, Pentagon with Microsoft. Was I think 10 billion, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a multi-billion-dollar contract. So the public sector, obviously, they don't innovate at the speed as the private sector, right? So they do need that. Public-private partnerships, or even large enterprises in Pakistan doing partnerships or work with good tech companies within Pakistan is something that's not happened. So if you went and heard me about 3 years ago, like people asked me some questions of like, what are the biggest pain points? To my surprise, large enterprises within Pakistan, non-tech companies, had very little work done to innovate in partnership and collaboration with good tech companies in Pakistan. That was a big surprise to me. Because if that would have happened a few years ago, amongst other things, what that does is it trains the ecosystem to move up. They're not totally dependent on the export side. They learn skills even locally. So if you have an industry locally who wants to be a more technology-infused company, they would not just hire people and do it themselves. They need to partner with someone to get that going at least, right? That completely lacked over here. So public-private partnerships are very weak, in my opinion, in Pakistan. I think if the government or different areas within the public sector decided to innovate at a faster rate, they would be hugely beneficial. I know CodeNinja did something with the KP government recently. It was a public-private contract where they helped them out. These types of initiatives should happen. Obviously, it'll help the public sector, but it is also very beneficial for the private sector because they get to work in large ecosystems. Public sectors are complex, so they learn how to deal with complexity. They learn how to deal with relationships in a different way. So I think that initiative should be there. And again, the public sector would really benefit from things like transparency and authenticity and things that come in when you infuse technology. So it's a win-win. I think.
But I think एक जो myth रहता है about like the public sector is that either things tend to slow down or maybe there's just, as an outsider, let's say as an outsider that's not in the IT sector, a lot of the myths I have are around the fact that maybe, they have so much hold, the public sector has so much hold even during these public-private partnerships, that the private sector of that partnership is not able to make as much, progress or transform as much as they would want. And so is that a true myth or is it just?
No, that's actually the tip of the iceberg. It's actually worse. Because, the impact the private sector wants to make, it doesn't make it, but that loss of not making that impact is usually on the entity receiving the work. So that in this case, with the public sector. The tech company gets very frustrated because they want to spend their time doing better work, but they're not. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think the real challenge becomes that the public sector, especially in Pakistan, don't deal with the private sector as a private-to-private relationship. The private company can live with speed, because there are approvals. Public sector deals with public capital, so their approval processes are slower. It's more bureaucratic, and a lot of these similarities when you work with global enterprises, as our companies do, who are making $1 billion plus in revenue, they're also not as fast because there are procurement departments, there are approvals, there are multiple directors. It's a matrixed world. You take that to the public sector, it's hyper that, right? So that one can live with. What's harder to live with are the things you said. A couple of things you said earlier was, what type of innovation are we working on, right? And is the dealing with the private company very bossy, or is it a true partnership? Because like our companies all work outside. If you went and asked the CEO of one of the companies, hey, would you rather have a contract here or outside? They'll all say outside, even if the revenue and the profits are the same, because the working mechanisms are much better. So I think the public sector does need to focus on infusing innovation in their organizations, and I think they also need to have a better modus operandi of working with the private sector, so that relationship is encouraging, right? Speed is one can live with, that's just part of dealing with big organizations.
And I think living in Pakistan, we're all accustomed. It's sab kaam thoda slow to.
Right.
But how do you see Pakistan's role evolving in the international technology landscape? And also moving on to the CodeNinja conversation, how much of a role does CodeNinja have to play in on this?
Well, obviously, I'm very, very bullish on Pakistan's role in the global landscape and technology. I think when you take the basic advantages we have, the natural advantages, and you couple that with the opportunity that's opening up, it's massive. I mean, as an example, I told you, the fact that the company sizes are small is such a huge advantage when providing value for global enterprises. So our companies focus on with global enterprises and how to provide them value, right? For us to infuse AI in our development life cycles is much, much faster than most of the other companies that are 100x bigger than us, The world has such a massive need right now with the tectonic shift in technology that it needs to be fulfilled. And Pakistan's advantages are price, number of people, right? English-speaking language, technology-focused country where universities are wanting to do better in that space. When you take that and you channel that towards the demand that we know is in the trillions in this next decade, in the next 8 years, we've estimated that to be multiple trillions, right? And you will read many reports that have that. So when you look at all of that, right, the place is very right for us to take advantage of. And CodeNinja, as an example of a company, I mean, you look at their own trajectory in the last 2 years when they have started, since we've been involved, it's been wonderful to see, the clients they're capturing, the relationships they're building, and most importantly, the type of work they're doing. If you go around the office and you can look around, every glass is a whiteboard. That means because people are thinking, the culture has changed. Yeah. And when that's happening, it is inevitable in a way that those results will come. It's a big opportunity for us. If we don't capture this, we will have missed another technology age that has, we've missed the last 2 or 3. So we'll miss another one, and that shouldn't be the case.
Pakistan में बहुत ज़्यादा foreign investment भी आ रही है, right? So how can Pakistan, because एक time आता है जब जो foreign investment आती है, and there's a lot of it, right? Mm-hmm. But somewhere down the lane, the lines get blurred and we tend to lose focus of where that foreign investment needs to go to make sure that there's like a productive and a good outcome, right? Mm-hmm. So how can Pakistan ensure कि जो foreign investment आ रही है, वो translate करे into long-term growth for the IT sector over here?
So I am contrarian in this. I am not a huge fan of foreign investment disproportionately coming in, right? So as an example, if you are raising an investment of $1 million, I would say if you have good, smart local investors who have the elements of what foreign investors bring to the table beyond capital, but on top of that, have the local information advantage on how to help companies navigate through challenges, that's a better combination. And in my opinion, the amount of capital need at this stage of the ecosystem is so small that local investments should be able to suffice that. So regardless of whether it's local capital or foreign capital, the expectation that you laid out is exactly the same, that there should be long-term growth. Which is why, our fund and SAI has a very operational mindset with our portfolio of companies to say, all of you have to succeed. It's not a spray and pray strategy. You all have to succeed, and here's how we get there. Capital is one thing, exposure is another, clients another, a strategy inward looking is another. There's a whole slew of how companies should develop. But yeah, I mean, I think foreign investment, when it comes in, it is not equipped with the same information and should be catered for better. Foreign capital should not be the early risk capital. I think the early risk capital should come from local capital, which has the information advantage, hopefully is smart and strategic capital. And then if that succeeds, that's the biggest sort of attraction for international capital because you have proven success.
I think it's not only in the IT sector, but वैसे भी wherever foreign investment is coming in, foreign funding जहाँ भी आ रही है, it comes with so many conditions attached to it. It leaves very limited room for you to actually do anything on your own. So again, coming back to the point where you said, I think local investments would help. And there's a lot to learn from this episode, from this podcast, because there's a lot the education sector, the students can learn, and then there's also a lot that the IT sector can learn from this. So I think it's been a very insightful conversation. But just to wrap it up, what do you think are the next steps Pakistan should take to strategically position itself as a knowledge-based economy by, like the next 10 years? So by 2035.
I think we need a focus our focus needs to shift from doing basic things. In the last, I would say 5-7 years, one of my major concerns was that we are very disproportionately focused on freelancers as an example, right? And the writing was on the wall in 2020 that work is the first that's going to get automated. So obviously, we're very happy when individuals are able to generate income in foreign currencies and make more money than they would on a local opportunity. That's a win. That's a good thing. But policy has to be geared towards capturing the most difficult work at the global level. Like you have to equip an underdog, which is us, to go fight the big fight. Right? You cannot be comfortable and hide behind the fact, well, these are just steps towards the growth. The target has to be very clear that we want to win at the global level doing the most complex work. Now, how we get there, it's a journey which we'll put sweat and blood into, right? But if you don't have clarity that is what we're going after and all ships are burned trying to achieve that, then I think the journey becomes too slow, pivots too many times, the focus isn't there. So from a policy perspective, policymakers have to equip the private sector, the underdogs, to go fight and compete with global competition, but going after the biggest opportunities. We should not shortcut that. Getting there will be steps. But let's not assume that the iterative step is massive success that should be celebrated. Like our companies should be in RFPs in the Fortune 100 space all the time. Why is that not happening, right? And I use that example of Fortune 100 because in that space, or Fortune 1000, in that enterprise space, they're competing with each other constantly, right? And these are companies with turnover in the hundreds of billions. And when that turnover is happening, the competition is very high. Innovation speed, innovation complexity is very high. We should be there. That's when the best talent grows. That's where vibrant things happen. And when you get used to that, none of these companies would ever turn back.
I think there's a lot of mindset change that needs to happen within Pakistan and within the people in itself, because maybe there's so much negative thinking and a negative mindset involved in all of this. So like, how you were saying the Fortune 100 or Fortune 1000 thing, बहुत पाकिस्तान में ये hindrances आएंगी अगर if you say this to a regular person, they'll be like, अच्छा हमारे पास तो opportunities ही नहीं है या हम कभी उस level पे जा ही नहीं सकते. But I think what they don't realize is that they need to create those opportunities for themselves to begin with. So I think that's the one issue that we are.
People asked me a few years ago when I moved back to Pakistan. I still get this question asked a lot, right? Like, why'd you come
back?
And what do you bring? What did I learn? I think the thing I tell people the most is that the ability to trailblaze, right? The ability to see a path and reach the end, right? That exposure is probably more valuable than even the capital I'm able to bring to our companies. Because when you've not done something, and there are not many examples who've done it, the negativity sets in, right? Well, it's not possible. Well, it is possible. The Western world or the developed world, the thing to learn from them a lot, right, is one, the constant need for innovation. And I'll give more reference to the US because my experience is of that space. The constant need to innovate and the ability and the mindset to actually execute on that and come at the other end, scarred, but alive and successful, right? Once you do that a few times, then you don't get phased with problems. And I think our ecosystem generally has negativity because it's more about why things cannot happen. and not about why they can't, and they will, and we hope that, through companies like CodeNinja and others, that success stories actually start to go out with younger students who are either aspiring to add value in a large organization or are being entrepreneurs themselves, that they see these examples, that say, yeah, you can envision something, you can go through ups and downs, and you'll come out at the other end and you'll be okay. That's the only sort of way to actually inspire.
Yeah, no,
stories.
I think that's the biggest takeaway from this entire conversation that we've had. And hopefully, inshallah, we can have this conversation a few years later maybe and see how much Pakistan has developed. But thank you for coming. And
thank you for having me.
It has been a lovely conversation, especially for someone like me that is not related to the STEM sector at all. But I think I've learned quite a lot as well. We hope you enjoyed watching the conversation as well. Please stay tuned to RadioLUMS and see you next time. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you.